So I'm working on my PhD about research history of Stone Age in Finland. And this is really sort of an offshoot of my research that has proven very interesting. But I'm actually looking at like the view of the past during the 18th and 19th century, when archaeology did not really exist or was just evolving, like in this like conceptual history viewpoint. But this is actually an essential part of the research history of Stone Age as well. So this is a very large topic for a short presentation, so I'm just going to just quickly explain this phenomenon and glance the roots of this folklore and the history of collecting stone artifacts. And the material that I'm presenting, the examples of magical use are from Finland, but the folklore is really similar all over Europe and even the world. So these two stone axes have been collected for the National Museum of Finland during the late 19th century. They are from the parish of Jaakkima in Karelia, which is nowadays on the Russian side of the border. And there are like these chunks missing from them, and there are these pentagrams scratched on the surface. And it is not known when or where they were originally found. They were simply kept by some person in their house, and when the museum people came to collect for antiquaries, they were reluctantly given up. And there are a lot of Stone Age artifacts that look like this in the collections of these stray finds that have been collected during the late 19th and early 20th century. And the texts written by archaeologists of the time are full of lamentation that people ruin these Stone Age artifacts and don't want to give them away, because we will see that they are really useful for all sorts of magical use, so of course people didn't want to give them away. So when people found these objects without knowing that there had been once a Stone Age, that these were ancient tools, they thought they were intriguing. Like we know that like the surface of a polished stone tool, it's nice to touch and they are beautiful and interesting, so they must be something extraordinary. And all sorts of strange things can be found, and some of them are actually natural from the ground. So there are these fulgurites that are actual geologic formations caused by lightning strikes when the electric current transforms the mineral structure, and some objects that are called thunderbolts or thunderstones in folklore actually are these kind of objects and not man-made artifacts. Or they're like fossils that look like living things but are made of stone. They also perplexed people when they didn't know about evolution and how they actually were formed. And especially in this like medieval world of the view, the boundaries between living things and dead things were sort of blurred. Like in this picture where there are these vessels coming just spontaneously growing from the ground, as well as these bewildered looking animals. It's like life can maybe appear spontaneously, also objects can just appear spontaneously, and maybe like this ammonite that has been carved to look like a snake, maybe it can transform to a living snake or something like that. And also these like man-made artifacts, for example, Stone Age arrowheads, could be made, maybe they were made by supernatural beings because they look like something that people make, but we know that people don't make arrowheads out of stone, so they must be from the supernatural world. And as well, like megaliths, Stone Age structures, like in Katie's presentation, the first one we heard today, they look familiar to people. They are recognizable as man-made architecture, but they are somehow so strange that they must have a connection to supernatural world. Well, this tradition concerning thunderbolts, however, is much older than these examples from the medieval times, for example, that I showed. That thunderbolts are known from classical texts, from Greek and Roman sources. It is known that in Etruscan religion, for example, there were special beliefs or rituals related to places where lightning strikes. And It is known from archaeological finds that Stone Age axes were used as like pierced amulets and so on in later stages of prehistory. And also in Finland there are examples of Stone Age artifacts found from later contexts and already from the Iron Age. And actually the beliefs connected to thunderstones are sort of related to this image of a thunder god with a weapon like Thor's hammer or Zeus or Jupiter with the lightning that they throw, and it causes a damage, or it can be found later as a tip of lightning. And like you can see from these names that are used, there's always thunder related to them, or in these Finnish words, ukonvajat or ukontalta, there is mentioned the name of the Finnish thunder god is mentioned in there, as well as like Torsvik in Swedish. So these things are like somehow all connected, but this should be totally like the subject of a different presentation or a separate research. But this is probably what this belief has been in its original core, like maybe during the Iron Age time or something. But the tradition that we encounter in 18th century or 19th century texts is sort of like diluted form of this, that the connection of thunder is still present in there. And since this folklore still persisted in early 20th century, when people already knew that there had been Stone Age and these are not related to supernatural things going on with thunder, it's really lasted very long. So what did people actually do with these poor Stone Age artifacts when they found them? There is always this origin story that they are objects that fall from the sky when a lightning strikes. They do the damage that the lightning causes, for example, to a tree when it's splintered. And sometimes they are even found from trees in these legends or folklore, and sometimes they fell from the sky on a freshly mowed grass or snow, or even some person's carriage when they were driving. There are all sorts of stories related to this. And sometimes there are a lot of these legends that it buries itself in the ground and you have to wait for a certain amount of time until it comes up, and then it can be found. And then people most commonly place them in their house, where they protected from lightning striking the house or fires. They could be placed under the foundations when the house was built, or kept in the attic, or just kept in a drawer. But also, other than this use for protection, there were also active magical uses for them, like just pressing aching or sore place with them helped, especially for toothache, or then they could be mixed, like this powder grinded from them, or those chunks took off and mixed with food or drink, preferably booze, and then they could cure all sorts of illnesses. And if you had a crush on someone and then fed them this powder, they would also fall in love with you. And these marks that were scratched on them, the surface, they were thought to enhance the stone's magical powers. And they were also kept with witches or warlocks, or sort of, what do you call them in English, in these witch bags as one of the magical amulets used. And if two warlocks met on the street and the other one didn't have a thunderstone, they had to give away and step aside, because they were not as powerful warlock than the other one that did have a thunderstone. And these sort of beliefs were still recorded during the late 19th century from the Finnish countryside. Since they were this useful, of course, people did not want to give them away. Then I'm going to lastly point out some beliefs of thunderstones, how they, the fact that they were collected and kept for centuries, because this folklore actually affected the research history of Stone Age archaeology. There was these analogies noticed between the shape of thunderstones and the stone tools that were still used by Native Americans almost as soon as Europeans came into contact with the native population of the Americas. And especially during the 18th century, there was a lot of discussion going on in France. There were lots of people who published these analogies. And they still had to fit this idea of stone being used before metals to this biblical chronology But there were passages in the Bible mentioning the use of stone tools, and there were texts from from Roman and Greek writers about these successive periods of human history based on the prevalent raw material. And when these were connected, then people started to play with this idea that maybe ancient Europeans were once also similar to the Native Americans, also culturally as well as in material culture. And in my research, I've been going through these 18th century dissertations and looking for mentions about this folklore or mentions of about the concept of the distant past, how it is viewed, and is there any trace in Finnish texts about this ongoing conversation. But so far, I think it seems that they were pretty not interested in the material residue of the past, that they sort of mention it and just leave it there. only remains of prehistory they are sometimes interested are the mega structures, because they are so hard to miss on a landscape that you have to make up some sort of explanation for them. But this emergence of the idea of the three-age system and the acceptance of that was just the first step in this discovery of Stone Age or prehistory, because they still had to work out the deep time chronology, and that took the whole 19th century. And I think some people have not yet accepted that even today. Okay, so thank you for your attention.